The word Matador stands for Medium Artillery Tractor, MAT, hence Matador. Strictly speaking, it's a pulling vehicle, not a truck, but more of a tractor, meant to pull large anti-aircraft guns. That was the main scope for the manufacture of this truck. At the same time, the truck was versatile. It could also carry troop. It had 2 benches, a standard, meaning it could carry between 4 and 5 soldiers per row, together with all the ordnance and the gun in tow. Essentially, that was the primary role and function of this vehicle. About the wartime use of the Matadors in Malta, from photographic evidence, we can say that we have seen them pull different types of heavy anti-aircraft guns. We have seen Matadors in use carrying troops. We also have seen a kind of universal use of the truck. For example, carrying replacement barrels for anti-aircraft guns. As you can imagine, the problem that Malta had primarily was being an island. It struggled to maintain a sense of normality. Life was all about mitigating the limitations that presented themselves from one day to the next. So unlike on the UK mainland, where a truck could have a dedicated function, like for example always pulling a certain type of gun, in Malta it was quite a different situation. People had to adapt to an ever-changing situation. And the Matador would find itself, possibly even as a recovery vehicle. We're not sure if it was during the war, but we know post-war some of them were fitted with beams at the front and pulleys going over the front bumper. They would fit large metal bumpers for more strength, and the Matador would effectively become a towing vehicle for very heavy ordnance, very heavy recoveries. It was an extremely powerful truck. It even has a winch underneath which can tow. You can see the one end of the winch cable here. It could tow from the rear and also from the front. So it was an extremely versatile vehicle, a pulling vehicle, a carrying vehicle, and over the years we could see some adaptations. You could see a standard. You can see the wire trays up there, which were used to store kit or objects for traveling troops. There would typically be canvas in Malta. Very often the canvas would just be from one curve to the other, probably because of the climatic conditions, very little rain, shall we say. So the canvas on the sides in several photos doesn't appear to be in place. There used to be closed canvas here at the rear and a couple of windows in the side canvas up front, but more often than not, the side canvas was removed, and we would see only either sheet metal or canvas on the top. This is actually the third Matador I owned, and simply because the first two required an extreme amount of work, and due to the size of the vehicle, it's very difficult to find service providers who can do the combination of mechanical work, carpentry and panel beating. I opted to sell my first two Matadors, keeping a number of spares and buying a relatively complete one. And this particular model had been exported from the UK in the 1980s to the United States of America. I found it on a ranch in Iowa in the US, and I found it online, and I purchased it literally over a few photographs and a few phone calls with the owner. I got it trucked from Iowa to the port of New York, a distance of about 1,200 kilometers. And then I got it shipped to Southampton. From Southampton, it was unloaded in Genova. After something lasting about 12 months, I managed to get through all the red tape and receive it in Malta. It went straight into the workshop, and it required an inspection of the suspension and the braking system, which I had overhauled, in fact. I did have some structural mechanical issues which were corrected and repaired. And essentially now the truck is in very good nick. Today is actually the culmination of a vision of a friend of mine from 38 years ago, a chap called Godwin, who taught me everything I know about military vehicles. He was a mentor on historic wartime vehicles, and 38 years ago he encouraged me to buy the first Matador with this vision to see it completed in Malta camo livery, as you are seeing over here. Unfortunately, Godwin passed away 7 years ago. He couldn't see the realization of this project, and here it is, the first Matador done up again in Malta camo on the island since the Malta camo pattern stopped being used in 1943. So after a period of practically 80 years, Malta now has a Matador in its original wartime livery, and as was typical during the war, Matadors were given names very often, trucks in general, either male or female, or the names of a location. In my case, I couldn't think of a name more apt than naming it after my good friend Godwin, and I hope somewhere, wherever he may be, that he could see what took almost 40 years to realize, and we finally have it. Something about the camo. As you can see, this is a slab type of camo, similar to the construction blocks used in building Maltese houses. In comparison, you can see rubble wall camo on this Austin utility here, which was a period vehicle from the same year of manufacture as the Matador. The theory was that the rubble wall camouflage resembles a lot the rubble walls of Malta, which were very prevalent during World War II. And this slab presents an image of a building, a small building, which buildings were also very typical in wartime Malta. There was a theory which for a while, until many photos began surfacing on the internet, proved not to be the case. The theory we had heard originally was that large vehicles were painted with the slab pattern because they looked more like small buildings, while slower vehicles typically lower than the height of a rubble wall, would be given the rubble, the irregular stone pattern. However, now that many photographs have surfaced, we have seen small vehicles in the slab pattern, and we have seen large vehicles in the rubble pattern. So both patterns were quite interchangeable. It's been converted by a group of volunteers from the Battlefront organization. The project started in February 2023 with sanding down the wood and all the metal, preparing the base by using a primer, using a red oxide type of foundation for the oil-based paint that was to follow. That was an extensive job. At times we had a group of up to 8 people working on the truck, sanding all the various parts. Then the base primer was applied in red oxide color, and then we applied the base color, which is the sand that you can see. And after we applied the sand color, we traced the slab design, which was then followed up with small paint brushes by hand, by freehand, and the chocolate brown type of color was added to symbolize the color of the grass, if you like, between the stone or rubble in the Maltese environment, which was predominantly, if it was grouting, it would be some shade of some darker shade, cement color. If it was a rubble wall in winter, you would have grass growing through the stone. So we have some rubble patterns where instead of the chocolate brown, they applied green. We borrowed a number, which you can probably see on the door there, from a real photograph of one of the regiments which were in Malta. I believe it was the 10th Heavy Anti-Aircraft Regiment. So that number there is an authentic Malta wartime Matador number. Its tax sign on the front and rear is coming from the 11th Heavy Anti-Aircraft Regiment Royal Malta Artillery. So the tax signs of the truck would show the blue and red and the number 11 for the regiment, and then there would be an emblem of the 8-pointed Maltese cross in the two colors, yellow and blue, of the anti-aircraft regiments, and there would be a border signifying heavy anti-aircraft in the case of this truck, which would be a red border going around the perimeter of the 8-pointed cross. And the vast majority of all this paintwork was done by the Battlefront volunteers, and I want to take the opportunity to thank them wholeheartedly for the several weeks and months of work that they applied on a voluntary basis. And now, as far as I possibly can, I will support Battlefront by having the truck take part in as many of their events as possible.